Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Tuesday, June 13th. That means it is Project Prospect Day here on the show. Derek and Riper, Saris, Chris Welsh, all here with you. Full house today as we dig into a few topics. We had a recent debut in Colorado that I thought we should discuss on the show because it was a non-prospect getting the call over the weekend, but one that could actually help us in some fantasy leagues. We have some clarity forthcoming on Eury Perez. So we'll talk about what the Marlins appear to be doing with him. Several players at AAA, either recently promoted or playing well at that level, who could be knocking on the door for some big league promotions. And we may get into some dynasty movers. Welsh has an updated dynasty rankings list coming out later this week. So we'll probably talk about that a little bit this week and a little bit next week, depending, of course, on where the wind takes us. Because as we know, this show goes any number of directions once it begins. But we'll start our branch today. Our first branch is a recent debut. Welsh, who is Coco Montes? He was called up over the weekend by the Rockies, and I think the general consensus in the fantasy community is if a Rockies player gets called up, especially if it's a Rockies hitter, we're interested in learning more about this player to determine if they can take advantage of the hitter-friendly environment that is Coors Field and deliver some fantasy goodness. So I did some number scouting, and I had to wonder how much of what Coco Montes has done in the minor leagues is simply the byproduct of playing half his games at high altitude Albuquerque.
100% good questions. And these are ones that I don't think any of us are going to have the answer to until we get like a good period of time and some context on him. But he has been a guy that's been on my radar because I try as hard as I can in my development of like who I pay attention to with prospects. He's a total not me guy, because he's 26 years old. He's way overaged. He did 2 stints in AAA, 2 stints in AA. I mean, he just kept going. He's a age over level type of guy that doesn't necessarily just jump out to me. But throughout the minors this year, he's done nothing but hit. I actually, prior to the debut, I did put a tweet out that Coco Montes is someone you should pay attention to, because this could be a guy because of what he did in the minors. And if he's going to get some run in the majors, that's what we do. He's second, currently, out for a couple of days now, but third in the minors in hits overall. 78 hits, 321 in the minors, while also showing some good power. And then, as you know, in the debut, he hits a walk-off homer. So I think Coco Montes, we look at high elevation and we focus on that, what he did in the minors. Well, he gets to go do that in the majors for the most part. This is just like a high contact guy. I don't think I'm not even sure if there's 15 plus homer power in there, but I do think this is a guy that could be one of those like prototypical number 2 hitters. I think he's going to hit for a good amount of contact, and he's just going to be a source of where you're going to be able to pull in at least probably 3 categories. And if the Rockies were able to put him more in the middle of a lineup over time, you could be 4, but I think you're going to be looking at batting average. You're going to be looking at runs, and then somewhere between RBI and homers he'll go, but he's not a big stolen base guy. I'm very much into it. I like the contact numbers. He was pulling in the minors quite a bit. Not a big ground ball guy, just gets the ball in the air, and he's a solid hitter that's going to get opportunity in Colorado. So this is why I think this is a deep league look, at least for the short term. And hopefully they make like an investment in keeping him around for some time, because nothing was getting accomplished in AAA. I want to say he might have been the minor leagues hits leader until he got called up. But then fellow prospect Yanquiel Fernandez actually has taken over for him in Colorado. And Ronnie Mauricio is actually the number 1 hits player in AAA right now.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Players like this often slip through the cracks. I mean, they're not on prospect lists, not on top 400, top 500 lists, but they get an opportunity. They have ways of helping us. And sometimes in keeper and dynasty leagues, they end up being really good min bid or near min bid pickups just because they play longer than expected. In this
to be fair, I want to point out, I did have him. I want to say he has been on my prospect list for the year, and he's been inside the top 300. If people have paid attention to any of it, he has been someone that's been on my radar just because of his ability to hit. But your point is valid across the board. He just screams like 26 years old, Colorado, very, very minimal interest in it. But I think there's a lot of offensive potential.
All he has to do is outplay Harold Castro.
Oh, it's just Harold Castro. We lost DVR there. But he does have to outplay Harold Castro because there's no Brendan Rodgers as well. So there's really no one to take over the spot.
I was just flying through the park factors for the different parks in the Rockies system.
Okay.
And I don't actually know. In 2019, when he was an A ball, I don't know what park that was. Because there's been all this reorganization in minor league baseball.
I was about to say I had an answer for you, but you know what? I don't, because you're right. They've reorganized so much. And that's kind of the thing, is he's been around since 2018. He was a 21-year-old in rookie ball, and that's how long this push has kind of taken.
I'm pretty sure that Double-A is Hartford.
Yes.
And he had a 190 ISO there and a park that was basically fair. Baseball America says Hartford's home run park factor is like a 0.97. And then he went to Albuquerque for 2 years, where his home run park factor was 1.11. But it's not just Albuquerque, it's El Paso, 1.11, Las Vegas, 1.27, Salt Lake is over 1. So, that's a fairly friendly park. I would say it's generally a friendlier league than the one Hartford's in. Hartford does have Bowie in it, but otherwise they're more close to 1 there. Any case, I think that league where he had the 190 ISO is closer to where I would think his true talent lies, right? So I would think he's somebody that could have average-ish power, slightly above average power, but he's packaging that with up and down walk rates and what I expect will be high strikeout rates. So, when I look at these projections, I totally understand where they're coming from. This idea that he'll hit 250 with a large BABIP, maybe because Coors inflates the BABIP, a 27, 28% strikeout rate. Yeah, it's not my type of player.
Yeah, he's not sexy.
Age aside, just even the plate skills leave me cold a little bit. But, looks like power and a little bit of speed and some opportunity. A 108 max EV in the minor leagues this year. If you're sort of drooling at those nice ISOs, I would say be careful. I think those are more mirage than anything.
Yeah, and just the last to add is what's interesting is if you want to look at it as 7 stops, if we're counting the major leagues, through 7 stops, he's had a 180 or higher ISO in 5 of those 7 stops. There was a weird, really out of pocket one in Double-A in 2022, but it's something to watch with the contact changes. And I should have pulled this because I was looking here. I want to say when I was looking
the walk
over,
rates have been getting better over time, I would guess.
Yeah, and also what you've seen line drive rates go up over these last couple levels. He's getting the ball in the air more. Home run to fly ball ratio has gone up, and he's continuously looking to pull the ball even more. So I don't know, like these are the type of changes at those late levels. This is like late maturation, but this is like maximum tap into what you have. So it's
and that's actually the one nice thing about like a 26-year-old debut is like at least the dude is going to be at his peak.
Yeah, exactly. This is like max effort, max talent of what he is. Is Coco Montes a 12-team guy? Nah. But is he like our deeper league guys? I think it's worth taking a peek at, DVR.
Unfortunately, one of the other call-ups that is a big deal that's coming up right now. I don't know if it is a big deal. I think he sort of falls into the same bucket as Coco Montes, which is slightly interesting in certain types of leagues, probably not the more shallow leagues. But Owen White is being called up by the Rangers. There's everyone's sort of pointing at the fact that his swing strike rate was down and his strikeout rate is down, and pointing to things like his FIP and his xFIP and his expected numbers at Double-A this year just being kind of poor. I will point to one aspect of his scouting report, or actually 2, that I find really compelling. Fangraphs gave him a 70 slider, and they also gave him 50-60 command. That combination, I'd have to expect, is basically what the Guardians try to do. And they do pretty well. They sometimes beat my model. They're considered a pitching factory. And if you think about it, having a 70 grade slider and 50 or 60 command, that's a real foundation. I mean, that's if I could only give you two things, that's great, because everybody always wants to, what's the third thing? Does he have a changeup? Does he do this? Does he do that? But if I gave you just a fastball and a slider that you could command really, really well, and the slider was really good, I think like your chances of having a good outcome are way higher than if you didn't have those things. Like those are some foundational aspects of a pitcher that I like.
I'm interested to see how it all comes together, because I've seen him on the backfields. I've seen him in AFL, and yeah, I mean, the slider's probably there. I've seen a lot of the curveball usage. I feel like there was more curveball usage in the AFL. Fastball's fine. I don't know if the command is like right up there. Yeah, I keep going back to like Bryce Miller. I keep thinking about Bryce Miller right now. Bryce Miller just coming off of like a solid outing, and he went right back to who he was. He was 73% fastball and slider. He was just 95 plus and slider and fastball. That's all he was. And he got both those pitches in the zone. He pumped the zone. And
so maybe Owen White was, maybe his swing strike rate and his K9 are down because he was doing this curveball thing.
Yeah, and that's where I'm going with it, is I wonder what type of pitcher he's going to be. I feel like so many of these guys have been these big primary fastball pitchers that we see. Maybe Tanner Bybee wasn't quite, but they all kind of have been that. Taj was one of the big differences. Most of these minor league guys, it's just been like really heavy fastball and not completely unloading a lot of the secondary, optimizing these pitchers. And I just wonder who Owen White's going to be, because I don't think his fastball is on par with a lot of these other guys. But if that slider is punching, then you got something there. So I'm just not like insanely optimistic. I'm not the biggest Owen White guy in the world, but he definitely, he's put in the innings over the last couple of years, and AFL is a good little, barrier of competition for him to go at. It's just odd that I didn't even see this call up before. He's going from AA straight up. So that's a pretty big push for Owen White.
Yeah, that John Gray injury, that blister sort of popped up somewhat unexpectedly, at least to me, on Monday. So that's the quick adjustment.
Short-term deal, huh?
Yeah, it could
like
be
a spot starty thing. Yeah.
Curious to see how it plays out, though, because I think when you look at the Rangers, the questions you have are, okay, sans DeGrom, especially as they deal with probably more injuries over the course of the season, because every team will, of their depth starters, of their prospects, who can they actually turn to for high quality innings? White was someone I was really excited about. And like a lot of people, I see the drop in Ks, the increase in walks simultaneously while repeating a level. And that really does lower my expectations a lot compared to where they were when he was pitching at AA before he got slowed by a forearm injury last year. So it is weird to see the 70 slider with that 50-60 grade on the command, though. That alone makes him pretty intriguing. And maybe they're going to use him as more of a glue guy in the short term before using him more in the rotation later on this year.
Because ostensibly the plan is that Cody Bradford takes John Gray's turn. Cody Bradford does not have a defining characteristic that I would point to is really I enjoy. I don't know. I'm just like he 89.7 on the fastball. So he must have a really great breaking ball. Maybe the command is there, but his numbers pale in comparison to Owen White's in the same places. At virtually the same times. I'm sure he's in a lot of the same rotations as Owen White. So I prefer Owen White to Cody Bradford. And if anything turns into a long-term issue with Gray or Eovaldi, he's always been a guy, or Andrew Haney, who's always been a guy that's been injured. I could expect sort of White to leapfrog some of these guys like Spencer Howard, Cody Bradford. Owen White is the guy that could leapfrog them if there becomes a long-term opportunity. And I think this short-term opportunity will be a bit of a showcase for him to say, can I leap past Cody Bradford and be the sixth starter here?
I want to throw one other little thing out real quick. I think I mentioned this on the show, my contact via with the Rangers. I had heard a thing about potentially at some point this year, even Jack Leiter being someone who could contribute, especially if he shows consistency. And I do think it's interesting that you've got a double-A guy jumping up. Jack Leiter is repeating double-A. He has definitely seen some big changes. He's got huge strikeout numbers, 12.1 K per nine.
Consistency in the walks, right?
But the walks have been the problem. But he made kind of a concerted effort on his approach earlier in the year, except the consistency has just kind of gone back and forth. He had a 7-walk game on May 23rd. He hasn't had a single game this year where he hasn't walked a guy, but 3 of his last 5 starts, he's had 7 or more strikeouts. He hasn't given up more than 5 runs since, or even 4 runs since April. So, I mean, it's been there, but he's a guy that could contribute in some capacity. But we might start seeing what the path is for the Rangers in getting some of these guys contributing in a bullpen multi-inning type of role. And I wonder, Owen to Jack Leiter, who's the guy that has more of a push the whole year?
Yeah, I
that's
think
a good one.
I think it might be Leiter. I think with Owen White, there's also concerns about how they're going to manage his innings because of the injuries he's dealt with over the years too. With Leiter, maybe they're more comfortable letting him go from this.
But he's
point
already
forward.
eaten up 56 of his 92 from last year. So
yeah,
one thing with Jack Leiter is he's trying to change his approach to pitching, right? Like he's trying to be more north-south than east-west.
Yep, that's exactly right.
So that's asking him to throw his pitches to new locations. Now he had a 5.5 walk rate doing it the other way, so maybe there's just a true talent lack of command. But it may just take all 90 of those innings to get him used to the new way of throwing.
And what if it's like with what they're dealing with, especially any injury is just a brutal blow with the Rangers right now. What if you stack an Owen White and a Jack Leiter and you get those innings in and you just get 3-ish out of both of them in a game and you turn them into one pitcher? Might be an interesting way to go. Maybe you come in the back half of the game with Leiter, you start off with Owen White, and again, I know you take up the roster spots, but it's something that the Rangers
becomes a little bit of a stress on the bullpen. But the Giants are doing it right now. Jake Junis and Sean Manaea are basically one pitcher.
Yeah. So maybe you could do it with double-A pitchers that got some weird inning caps. You cap them at 4 innings total. If you get a dominant performance, you get both of them to take you to the 9th. If it's not great, you probably can get both of them to at least get you to the 6th. So it can be a tax on the bullpen, but if they work in any capacity, if you could be guaranteed you can get to the 6th or 7th with those 2 guys, you could justify the bullpen not being hit as hard. It's just something I'm thinking about. I'll probably reach out and see if that's any type of consideration with some of these arms, because I think it's an all hands on deck thing with the Rangers with, obviously the DeGrom injury.
Yeah, we're seeing a similar thing happening in Miami right now as far as innings management goes. This was expected. Eury Perez, it sounds like, based on the latest reports from Barry Jackson and Craig Mish of the Miami Herald, that once Trevor Rogers comes off the IL from his biceps injury, Eury Perez goes down for a while. Reason being they can just start him like once a week and go shorter with those starts and not really have this guy that's really good at the big league level, but someone you can't use as often as you want to. So it's a really tough line to walk, but this seems to be the shorter term plan to keep him closer to that 110, maybe 120 innings while still having him available later in the year if they remain in a position to possibly go to the playoffs. Marlins, as of right now, are right in the thick of things as a possible playoff team in the NL. So it leads us to a tough question in redraft leagues. We knew this day was likely to come, and it's not official yet, but it's right around the corner. How long can we realistically stash a guy like Eury Perez on a bench in a redraft league, not knowing exactly when he's going to come back? How would you try and forecast that out? Is it only 3 or 4 weeks before he's back in the big leagues, or is it sometime maybe closer to post All-Star break before they start breaking him back in as part of maybe even a 6-man rotation?
I would assume it's like after the All-Star break. I think that's what you'd have to stomach. And I think you can, and I probably would, because we don't have it official. I think Trevor Rogers, by the way, if I remember correctly, I think he had a setback, or I think something happened in his last start it wasn't great. Maybe I'm completely wrong on it, but I thought he had some type of like setback or cancellation of it or whatever, but maybe you get one other start out of it. I don't mean to like return the question, but I'm just curious, let's say the Marlins want you. You're now the, scouting development talent director for this team. This team wants you, and you have this decision to make. What is the best play? Bring the guy down for a month, 6 weeks in the minors and do one start, or have him pitch 2 2 games a week in the majors, 2 innings plus max, where you can cap it. Like, do you think, you guys were talking yesterday about the Stanford pitcher going 156, and you want to talk about arm and development. Do you really think pushing a guy to pitch 2 innings for 6 weeks or whatever hurts his ability to go deeper later in the season? Like, is that a developmental stunt? Like, what's the play that you have that organization do with Eury Perez?
Yeah, I think especially since this team is currently in second place and tied for the first wild card, or a half game out of the first wild card, and they have this long history of not succeeding, I would try to use every inning of his that I could in the major leagues. And so whatever the plan would be in the minor leagues, I would just do that in the major leagues, because it's not like this bullpen is amazing. It's not like you look at this bullpen and you say, oh, well, what if Eury Perez was taking away innings from, who would he be? He would be taking away innings from
Braxton Garrett.
Nardi.
Oh, you're talking about the bullpen. Yeah.
Stephen Okert, Brian Hoying. Anyway, that's how I would do it. I would do it in the major leagues. And I guess the difficulty becomes roster management. Because in order to have Eury Perez in the major leagues while Trevor Rogers is up, and it does seem like they are doing some medical testing on Trevor Rogers. It says that he could make a rehab start early this week if he receives positive medical records Sunday. I've not heard an update on that since. But if you were going to have Eury Perez on this team and Trevor Rogers on this team, you would have to have the corresponding move. And the corresponding move would have to be, I think that there are enough players on this team that have options. Somebody like Andrew Nardi could go down, but Andrew Nardi's been pitching really well. So you might actually cost yourself someone that has been pitching pretty well. Huascar Brazoban might be my pick. 33-year-old righty with 3 options that has a pretty poor command. Why couldn't Eury Perez step in to Huascar Brazoban's role and maybe even try to keep him semi-stretched out with 2 inning stints? And the one big thing is your manager will hate you for it, because you will have a guy in your bullpen that you can pitch 2 innings tonight, and then he has to rest for 4 days.
That's the hard part for sure. But yeah, I think between Brazoban, Nardi, and Hoeing all having options in addition to Perez, 4 relievers with options gives you enough flexibility where you might be able to get through this stretch in the schedule. It is interesting, too, in that report from Barry Jackson and Craig Mish, you see that the organization is conflicted about whether to actually send him down or try something like this. I think he pitches at a level where you'd rather get those innings. You're getting upgraded bullpen innings. Someone goes short, someone has to leave because of an injury, or they're not pitching well, or
somebody
you're just in a
the
spot.
Starting rotation will get injured, and then by the time you need to put Perez back in, right?
That's all they do.
It's like just a softly managing like a 3-week spot, right?
Yeah, and I think Cueto just started a rehab assignment as well. Just throwing that out. I think he just started it last week. So that throws a little bit of a wrinkle in it. But getting back all the way to that question, it's like if they could keep him, because I don't think 2 inning stints a week hurts the development of a guy being able to be stretched out and go deeper into games and can help you the rest of the year. That would make it so much more palatable to hold on to him in our leagues, because you're still getting a little bit of run, even though it's not great. We know the talent.
Daily leagues or whatever you can.
Yeah, you could just throw him out there, but obviously it's going to put like rubber meets the road for a lot of people. If they say, hey, he's going down, he'll be back post All-Star break.
I'd hold as long as I could.
I would hold as well. I would have a tough time cutting him.
Yeah, it'd have to be other guys are hurt that you can't let go of because their ceilings are even higher. I think if you're going to get squeezed into that spot, I think from a bridging the gap perspective, so much more to have as your 9th pitcher if he's able to get you some innings out of the bullpen. But that decision, depending on the health of Rogers, could be just around the corner.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some players who have either been promoted recently to AAA or maybe been there throughout the season who could be knocking on the door for a promotion. Mike Vasil in the Mets organization just got the bump from AA, and maybe he's a little further away than the other players in this group, but this is a guy that I didn't really know a ton about coming into the season. He's 23, turned 23 back in March, former 8th-round pick in 2021. Really took a big step forward at AA. The numbers at high A last year were kind of just okay, over a strikeout per inning, but the ERA was up over 5. Excellent control, still missed a lot of bats, had a little bit of a home run issue at AA Binghamton. This Mets team's in such a weird spot that I think you're kind of at the anything is possible point where they're going to start making some more drastic moves. And they've had some trouble in the back end of that rotation, backfilling for some of the injured starters they had earlier this year as well. So you think we're going to see Vasil at some point before this summer is over?
Seems like it. It definitely seems like they also, again, in the preparation of everything, he was in the AFL this past year. It's one of the biggest, and one of the reasons, and you can always, put the pieces of the puzzle together. These teams send almost all of these guys in to be ready for rigors. Sometimes guys are injured and stuff like that, but it's the setting off point for these guys being ready to be in the major league. You have major league coaches that are out there. You're playing against top talent. Like, they put these pitchers out there usually when they're getting close to the majors, even though he was, at lower levels. Vasil looks like he's going to be one of those guys. I'm not the biggest fan. I saw him pitch once in the AFL. Obviously, this year's numbers have been great. I do think there's a pretty big fly ball issue that's going on. I don't think he's a monster strikeout guy, but he could eat up innings, and he's had a really successful run, so we should count that. So, yeah, I think any of these guys at this moment that have been brought up to AAA are post All-Star game options that teams are looking at when depth is needed. So I think Vasil 100% could get a few starts in with the Mets.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a whiff of developmental success here with Vasil, who wasn't amazing at Virginia and was an 8th-round pick, and has really sort of steadily marched forward in terms of strikeout rate and swing strike rate. A nice 17% swing strike rate at AA this year. Apparently, his slider is up 5 miles an hour from where it was in college. And that always gets my attention. 85 to 88 on the slider, 94 on the fastball with good spin and life. So, this is somebody I've got my eye on. I'd be hoping for sort of a sneaky, less trumpeted FAB bid, a little single digit action or something.
I think that's all that anyone has left after
exactly.
De La Cruz and all these guys.
Some 340s I saw in my leagues. How much money do you have left anyway? But and the other thing is for Vasil, I think there's going to be some opportunity in this Mets rotation. Either they go in one direction and want to see what they have for next year, or they go in another direction and want to have something better than Tyler McGill or David Peterson pitching, at the back end of their rotation. So I would guess that he gets, 5 starts in the major leagues this year.
Yeah, it seems like they're kind of done with McGill and Peterson as replacement starters at this point. You've seen enough to the point where you're not really expecting much to change for those two guys at this stage. It's funny that you think of Vasil as maybe a guy that could come up later this year and be a relative cheap fab addition. For anyone who has money left, if we see Emmet Sheehan get the call, I think that's where the remaining fab hammers on the pitching side are probably going in that direction. It seems like they're going to need him, though, right? I mean, they've already been dealing with their share of injuries. We've seen Gavin Stone struggle with the opportunity. We talked about Bobby Miller yesterday. He's been fantastic so far. But still, you could look at this Dodgers team and pretty easily find room for another pitching prospect in the second half.
Yeah, this is like this is where I'm going to be very blowhardy and talk about my AFL. Like, he was maybe one of the best pitchers in the Arizona Fall League. One thing I would throw in, which doesn't show up on this, is we've done this a lot, is like where we play the innings game and we look and we're like, okay, well, Sheehan had 67 innings, but what you've also got to do is throw another 20 to 30. I'd have to go back and look at the AFL numbers, but he actually, with AFL, probably pushed closer to 90 innings last year. One of the reasons they brought him back. So you want to start pushing, maybe he could get to 120, 130 if they feel really good about it. And he's at 50 right now. So there's 80 good innings in. And Sheehan has been one of the most dominant pitchers in the minors. It skews all the numbers when you look now because you've got complex level and stuff like that. But he has been at the top of swing strike percentage, strikeout percentage. He has been one of the leaders on the year.
41.7% in AA this year. Woo!
Bonkers. Almost 15 K per nine on
Yeah.
the season, which is crazy stuff. A 10% walk rate. It's still giving him an over 30% K minus walk percentage. He has absolutely pounded the zone. The fastball release point is really interesting in how he's getting on guys. I think it's making the fastball even better. Can throw strikes. He's had the inning work last year. And he, like I said, he's been like top 5 most dominant pitchers. And this is a guy that the Dodgers can absolutely work with however they want to mess with their rotations and stuff. That I think 2-3 starts in here to see what they have at AAA, the clock starts to tick. And when they bring Sheehan up, it's to finish out the year. So I, like you said, you nailed it, DVR. Like, this is like a hammer of whatever the hell you have left if he comes up, because boy, there's opportunity in that Dodgers rotation.
You're not at all worried
how
that
they played.
bring him up to do some sort of relieving to end the season, you know?
And they may, and if they do, they'll tell us. Here's another thing. Let me throw this out. Dustin May kind of stunk, like for some degrees. I know the ERA was like better, strikeout numbers were bad.
I was going to say there is opportunity in that rotation, but its name is Noah Syndergaard.
Yeah, Noah Syndergaard. Whoop. I completely agree. But between injuries with May, injuries with Urias, Syndergaard being bad, Bobby Miller's been a pleasant spot. Gavin Stone has stunk. Groove, not great. That A, they just throw him in, but B, maybe there is, again, a piggyback situation. They like to mess around with those things. Either way, no matter what it is, I think it benefits. And I think guys like Stone would be the guy to get 1 or 2 innings in relief, not Sheehan. I think it's Groove, Stone, those guys. And maybe, not saying they would do it, but maybe May is one of those guys that they just try to limit some of the chaos they've had with him. But probably not. Syndergaard is the first domino to fall. But I'm very, very much in on Sheehan. And hopefully they tell us what it is, too, so we don't have to play a guessing game, because that would suck to not know. And then they're like, oh, yeah, by the way, he's going to be relief the rest of the way through.
I don't know if they would necessarily turn to someone arriving as a standalone closer, but that's an unsettled enough save situation where saves aren't out of the question for someone who comes up and gets high leverage opportunities. They could just go full committee, and there's a few ways it could actually work out depending on what they want to do and who's actually healthy at the time that Sheehan eventually gets that opportunity.
Yeah, it'll be fun to watch. I was just at the Dodgers complex last week, and Daniel Hudson was rehabbing, and he threw in the game. This was on Tuesday or Wednesday, and then he threw one more. It looks really good. He looks like back on point. He should be back soon-ish, and he'll be kind of the guy in my mind to kind of watch, see what leverage point they put him in the rotation. And then, like you said, maybe they do throw one of those guys out there, one of those young guys in, and they just, Bruzdar, and maybe it's a Bruzdar and a Stone, or Bruzdar and a Emmet Sheehan. You never know.
I'll throw this one to you first. Luis Matos putting together a great season in the minors, thriving at AAA after a great start at AA. Is he coming to San Francisco this summer? Can he help this Giants team? Do they have room to just bring him up and make him a fixture in that outfield mix?
Austin Slater can't stay healthy, hasn't looked great in center, has been playing in left. Mike Yastrzemski is, I don't think, a great center fielder defensively anymore. They've had people like Bryce Johnson and Blake Wisely on the roster to patch over the fact that maybe late in the game defensively you'd rather have somebody else in center. So Bryce Johnson, whose best skill is that he runs fast, has been the center fielder late in games sometimes when he's up. All this to say, there's a massive opportunity in center field, I believe, in San Francisco. I think they can probably find some way to keep Yastrzemski, Haniger, and Conforto and Peterson all mostly in the lineup most days, even if they call up Luis Matos and play him every day in center. So I don't know if this is just me drinking the local Kool-Aid, or, I did spend a lot of time in the clubhouse in San Francisco sort of talking this over with other people. I feel like he's close. I feel like he'll be up this year. I think that he'll be up in the next 3 weeks. And there's a slight whiff of kind of like Luis Arias in center that I get off of him. That is pretty enticing to a lot of people. I don't believe the powers is really that big of a thing for him. I think it'll be just enough power to keep people honest and to keep that batting average up. It's not like a Nick Madrigal situation where he can't hit the ball hard. And I believe in the wheels, and I believe in the center field defense. And that bad year in high A last year, it was 407 plate appearances in high A in 2022 with a 74 WRC plus. But at the time, he was 20 years old. And I do think he gets at least one 25-point WRC plus boost based on his age alone. So if you look at his, his WRC pluses across, and you give him 100 in that one, he's either been pretty good or very good at most stops. So I think seen within the lens of sort of age at level, that 2022 is not as bad as it looks.
I had to make the difficult call in a keeper league where it was not, I didn't have enough roster spots, and I decided that Matos was going to take longer than I was willing to wait, and I let him go.
I dropped him in auto
and I am regretting that right now. I think the question I have for you, Welsh, is where do you see the ceiling with Matos? I mean, I think Eno is shining some light on fair questions about his power, but because he's so young, there's still some significant physical growth potential for Matos. So where are you at ceiling wise on him?
Yeah, I wish I could. I couldn't find it, especially on desktop Twitter here, but I was trying to find some of the video from the AFL of Matos, because I got a couple just absolutely towering balls. Because the thing with him is I like his stance. I like his approach. It's really easy, turns on it, and he barrels baseballs. And he's one of those guys. He just taps into power that doesn't look like it's there, because he's not like the biggest guy in the world. They list him 5'11", 160, and then maybe a little bit more weight on it. I think it's funny because I think he could go one of two ways. He could easily be that guy that is just a better real life player than fantasy player. But I also think there is something in there for what he's done at his age that he might blow by expectations, because he's probably one of the least heralded guys for what he's done this year. One of the most astonishing things to me to think about is this is a 21-year-old kid. He's striking out 7% of the time. 7% of the time, with an over 250 ISO in AAA. That's bonkers. That's insane. He's also at multiple stops walked a decent amount, and he's overcome some crazy adversity. He ended up winning, I think so, there was some award in the AFL. He was one of the best hitters that was out here for a period of time. He's got really good instincts. He can run, and I think right now he's set at like a 9:15 pace. I don't think it's crazy to think that, peak, he's a 2020 guy. I think he can put up a 15-15 season pretty easy, and he'll be a much more valuable fantasy asset in the short term than we think. And I agree with I think he's going to be up. I think he's up soon. I think it's that. I don't mean to create like arbitrary stuff here, but it's like the All-Star game seems likely. Maybe they don't want to call him up so he can be a part of the futures game, or it doesn't matter and he's called up right around it. But he helps this team, and he's arguably one of the better outfielders right now.
Interesting. There might be some politics around the futures game.
There really is. That happens a lot.
Well, because, as an organization, you want to have some guys out there. And if you take him off of that roster by bringing him to the major leagues, then do you get another guy in there?
I don't know who the hell they would send.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe Kyle Harrison.
Carson Wisenhunt.
Yeah, well,
maybe.
He's got a really nice changeup. But
he's got one of the best changeups I've seen in the minors. He's insane. I asked him about it last year too. He's crazy.
But in either case, like having a position player out there for a team that has been having some trouble producing young players, I think maybe that's it. Maybe it's right after the All-Star break, so 4 weeks.
Kind of a big cluster with the three of these guys between Casey Schmidt, Carson Wisenhunt, and Luis Matos all having the years they're having. All guys that are either at the big league level or close to the big league level. Wisenhunt maybe a little further. Patrick Bailey. They needed that in San Francisco. They needed that infusion of young talent beyond Kyle Harrison and Marco Luciano, and it's come through for them. So kind of a big win.
I have to admit, I mean, my impression of their farm system, what it's done, has has definitely improved this year. I didn't quite see this coming, and I wonder if some of it is short term, because I'm still not 100% sold on Casey Schmidt's future. Maybe it's a league average major league player in terms of wins above replacement, but I don't know if it's much more than that. I don't know if it's a fantasy asset really. And Bailey still has some swing and miss, and I'm not sure that any of the group is a star. But I do think maybe all of them are regulars. Yeah, right? Doesn't that seem like it's Schmidt, Bailey, and Matos are all
100%.
league
And who would have thought too,
guys
by
at
the way,
least?
that all of that's happening while Joey Bart is being sent down and he's not an option anymore. You know, I mean, Joey Bart was the can't miss guy. Marco Luciano was the can't miss guy, and both have been huge swing and misses. While what the Giants are doing is, I don't think they have top end real or fantasy talent, but they, like you said, they 100% have major league players that are going to be good complements. The problem is that they just need to hit on star. They need to find the star.
Man,
Closest to
Marco's
them
having
is
a bad
Matos to me.
year.
Who?
Marco Luciano.
Oh, he's
just
awful. He's
21
horrid.
though.
Yeah. It's been
He's
horrid though.
21,
But
but the strikeout rate is pretty poor.
yeah.
But a buy low in long-term leagues at Marco Luciano, or is that a say no?
Maybe. I mean,
me.
21 in Double A. We gotta adjust that WRC plus. It's not terrible. He's had other strikeout years where he's at 30% now, but just last year was 22%. You know, I don't know. On the level of like last player in a deal, or just pick him up and stash him, then yeah, I could still get with it a little bit.
To that. Yeah. Otherwise, I'm just not super interested. I don't think, like, I'll just be wrong or miss out, or like I'm over it. It's been too consistent this for so long, and he is getting passed left and right. He's inconsistent at every level. He just had like a great week, and like everyone's like, hey, look at Marco Luciano. He's like hitting under 200. He's just not, like, he has lots of talent that does not get tapped into, and he's been injured, and it hasn't happened. I mean, he was playing at the same level with Corbin Carroll, at the same level with CJ Abrams, at the same level with Luis Matos. And look at how far everyone has gone past. So maybe I'm not giving enough credit, and he is still 21. So maybe it is solid and like a last player, but I'm not targeting Luciano as like, hey, this is the buy low. I don't buy it. And I don't know there needs to be a change. And is that change available? Like, is there someone in that Giants organization that can fix whatever's going on? Or are they just letting him go? But it's just the same stuff. It's strikeouts, injured, never. This is the first time I think he's hit Double A. It's like never get to Triple A.
We're going to save the dynasty movers for next week, which will be good because the list will actually be up. So then people can actually look at it. Good timing on that. I had one more player I wanted to ask about. I had two until Ronnie Mauricio's injury popped up. So let's talk about Tyler Soderstrom. Can he break through and actually contribute to the A's this season? Playing a little better in recent days, has a couple of homers, walking about as much as he's striking out over the last week. Very small sample. This is a guy at AAA who won't turn 22 until November. He's catching a little more than he's playing first base. Obviously, Shea Langoliers is going to play a lot behind the plate, so they can share that role and kind of rotate between first base and DH. I'm almost wondering if Ryan Noda is playing well enough where they can just wait a little longer on Tyler Soderstrom and see if he can become a bit more patient at the plate, because he's got a weird offensive profile to me. Clearly, there's power, and I think there's a pretty good hit tool, but he doesn't walk as much as you'd expect for those other tools being where they are. So what kind of player do you think Soderstrom's going to be, Welsh?
I think he's going to be a big impact bat. I think he's probably in the major league to minor league. He's probably a top 4 bat in that entire organization. Like I said, from majors to minors, there's a big, I mean, the power is unreal. The way he can turn on it. I don't love the strikeouts, but I would also kind of, if we're talking age to level stuff, you go and take a look, and it's, 26% at 21 years old, where he's played the entire year, and he played through last year. So I think there's also how much longer do the A's want to bring him down? If you were changing positions aggressively, maybe, but he's like a classic. He'll be the second catcher. He can play first. He might even be able to play in the outfield. I think they could put Noda on a quarter outfield. I just think the impact of the bat helps right now, but it's like, when do the A's want that? When do they care? There's enough going on. Do they want to push development? But I think he will be up this year. I think he's a second half guy, and I think he's hitting 5 or 6 for this team. So I'm very much in on Tyler Soderstrom. He's like a top of the list guy. Rest of season, I'm trying to pick up.
Yeah, it seems like you could actually trade for him somewhat easily because he's lagging in WRC plus and some of the things we're always looking at with prospects on the brink of debuting.
But I'd be curious, I mean, have you heard like you were poking around on the Matos front? Have you heard anything on Soderstrom?
Well, I've got my green and gold on today because I'm headed to the reverse boycott, but I have not been talking to them. I mean, they're honestly not in the greatest position to start clocks, as much as that is a dumb thing that we get annoyed by. I don't know that they need to start Tyler Soderstrom's clock. Plus, if he's splitting time catching and playing first base, and there's still a chance that he can be a catcher, that usually means for a later debut, as most catchers get. It usually just means there's more time to be spent honing that part of his craft. And then lastly, the weirdest thing for me is his line is 258, 313, 550, which looks amazing. 292 ISO, 258 average, 26.5% strikeout rate for Soderstrom, but like, the rest of that line looks great. It's a 91 WRC plus. That's Vegas, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I do like the 113.5 max EV. So there's definite juice in that bat. But his line is not as good as it looks. And you have to go back to A-ball in 2022 to get a significantly good WRC plus. Just a note that I have. I mean, it's just weird that we all agree that, that this guy has power and it looks good and he's probably going to be a major league hitter. And yet his WRC plus, if you summed it up for the last, 500 plate appearances, is below average.
Yeah, I'm going to dig around a bit more and try to find a comp before next week, just because I'm in and I'm like, what other players with this profile have been in on in the past, and how has that actually worked out for me? No doubt about that power.
5%. You know who this reminds me a little bit of? Is Paul DeYoung. 5% walk rate, 30% strikeout rate, legit power, and a defensive position that's valuable. So, that affords you more chances. You can look at how up and down Paul DeYoung's career has been, and how, he's been afforded chances after he's looked terrible, because he can still play shortstop. And Paul DeYoung has been a valuable player in the big leagues, but for his career, he's hit 232, 306, 430, with a 98 WRC plus, good defense that's made him a valuable real life player. But how often has Paul DeYoung been a valuable fantasy player? Maybe 2-3 times in his career.
I'll do this real quick because I know we're getting out of here. I just have this vivid memory. This was right off of COVID. I was over at the Rangers facility. I'm at the Rangers, by the way. Rangers are playing the Mariners. And I'm standing there at the fence, as I do. And I got 2 coaches next to me. And all of a sudden, this coach starts talking about Tyler Soderstrom. Rangers and Mariners. This is not the A's. And this guy is just I'm like, this is crazy. And he's talking about Tyler Soderstrom. And the thing that stood out that coach was saying is he's one of the most talented players he's ever worked with, but you couldn't tell him anything. Like, Soderstrom was one of those guys that he had already had it in his head. His path was, he knew what he needed to do. And lightly saying taking to coaching was a tougher thing, because you could say it to him and he's like, okay, but he always did his own thing because this was his life. And he's kind of an intense guy. I've actually been around him in a thing before. He's kind of like a really intense guy. And I wonder how that's kind of gone in the process of, changing positionally first and catching and hitting, and how he's going to take to all of this, as far as like, we don't see the walks and the strikeouts. And I don't know how anecdotal it really is, but it's always stood out to me. It's the only time I've ever heard coaches, and many times I've been in the backfield, talking about a player on the other side of town that had nothing to do with that game. And it was like, that's the level of impact that they thought of his bat and who he could be versus what he was willing
But
to
also
be as
the
far
thing
as
they were saying was like negative.
it 100%, and how like they're, I mean, I'm not going to say everything they said, but it was implying his ability to be coached was one of the most difficult things
And
this
then
person had
you put him in
experienced.
Vegas that papers over any flaws that he might have. Like,
Yeah.
what if he was, isn't the Florida league that's the one that's pitcher friendliest?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, I think so. You're talking complex.
No, like Florida. I don't know if it exists anymore. The Florida State League or something.
Well, there's the Florida complex league
complex?
that's going on. There's also the like Florida Atlantic and stuff like that. I mean, but he's been playing and he's been Arizona based and
a professional league. Anyway, one of the
Yeah.
minor leagues that has the most pitcher friendly parks. I wonder what his line would look like.
I mean, it's something to
And
worry
would
about.
he
Like,
reconsider? Would he reconsider? His stance towards coaching or whatever.
yeah, and that's what I would love more of that, because one thing I point out is also he's one of those like huge max EV guys. He put up like 114 on Brandon Pfaadt at the beginning of the year. Like, he has got monstrous big power. It's just the ability to make consistent contact is the question. And then I throw in just anecdotally, like, hey, you just wonder, like how much is being picked up as far as coaching is goes, and how much is that happening in the A's system anyways.
Yeah.
I like that one.
Got it in there. Good jab at the final bell, too. Really well done. On our way out the door, a quick reminder, you can get a subscription for $2 a month at theathletic.com/rates and barrels. On Twitter, you can find Welsh at Is It The Welsh. You can find Eno at Eno Saris. You can find me at Derek Van Riper. If you had a question for a future episode, send that our way via email, ratesandbarrels@gmail.com. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We are back with you on Wednesday.
Thanks for listening.